Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with, as always, my co-host, John Barker, representative from the 70th District. And John just coming back, of course, from the Legislature and is going to update us on legislative updates. We have a special guest with us today, Tom Sawyer, from the 95th District of Wichita. And Tom, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
John, fill us in. What happened this week in the Legislature?
Well, it's been a busy week. We in Fed State we met every day except Monday, and we've worked bills. We've passed out some bills. One of the high points of the week, though, Doug, was on the floor of the House. We honored the American Legion, 100 years from 1919 to.
Yeah, 1919 to the present.
To the present. We had a number of veterans there, particularly the Korean War veterans. And it was just nice to see them on the floor. I was, since I'm a veteran, I got to go up and stand with them, and I thought that was just a neat deal. And, you know, the House, we always try to make those occasions special for our veterans. And so that was a good day. Other than that, we were on the floor of the House, you know, several days. One day we were on general orders, which of course is when we work bills, and had a number of bills. You know, I'm glad that Tom's here today. We've been friends since I've been in the Legislature. I think we came in 7 years ago together.
Yes, we did.
Not your first term.
No, my third time. But
folks, he's been here forever. He's 26?
26
years, former governor, candidate for governor. He was on my committee for the last 2 years for federal and state affairs. He gave me the best compliment I think I've ever received. He was on Fed and State because I was the chairman.
Yep, that is why.
And he was my vice chair when I was rules chair, and he got me out of a few predicaments. I didn't know what to do, and the best one was pushing the pause button.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I remember that.
Awesome.
So we are good friends. We differ on many issues.
Mm-hmm.
But on many issues we agree on.
We do. And
we always try to uphold the integrity of the House, and that's what I admire about Tom. He is an honorable person, and you know, we can have a civil discourse, right, Tom?
That's correct.
And that's where we're supposed to do it. But other than that, we did have a couple of important bills. Medicaid expansion on a procedural vote was ruled germane. I disagreed with that. I know you went up and argued it, but I had to bring it to your attention. We only get 2 minutes.
Yeah, that, you know what? That is amazing because my 26 years,
Right.
that I don't ever remember that being enforced before, and probably because the clerk of the House was supposed to make sure those things get enforced.
I know.
Didn't know. She didn't know either.
I brought it to her attention, and then I showed her the rule, and she said, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
But we got through that, and it was a good day for Tom and his group. It was a bad day for me and my group. I think the ended up vote on the Medicaid expansion was 69 to 54.
Yeah, that's correct.
But it was a very good debate.
It was.
Whether I like the subject matter or not, I do always like the debate.
Yeah.
And you had some very good comments.
Well, thank you.
I thought Representative Wolfmore did a great job. I thought we did a pretty good job.
Yes, yeah, it was a good debate. I appreciate good debates like that.
So do I. And I think it was 4 hours.
I think that's about right.
Yeah, 4 hours. That was a good day.
Yeah.
And we had several procedural votes or amendments that were introduced. The one I didn't, I thought would pass was the E-Verify.
Well, it almost did.
It almost did.
63-61. That's pretty close.
What's that mean, E-Verify?
Oh, it means that they would have to be E-Verified. The federal government has that program. Many government entities use it to ensure that you're an American citizen. And then if you are, then you would have been eligible for Medicaid expansion. Now, Tom will differ. I think it's 140,000 people that possibly could be enrolled.
Yes.
And what of that 40 to 70,000 would leave private insurance?
Well, that's.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's hard to say what that exact number is, but that doesn't necessarily mean they would leave it either. But
No.
they could potentially. They would fall in the category. There are people that would be eligible who currently have private insurance. In many cases, though, their private insurance may be better and they may want to keep it, but in cases where it's not, they will have an option.
One of my objections, of course, is I'm on Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
I have co-pays. These folks will not have co-pays.
Well, they would have a $25 a month premium.
That's true. That's true.
That was
That
added.
doesn't compare to what I pay for like Blue Cross and Blue Shield either. Supplement.
Yeah, but, you know, I supported that premium. You know, that wasn't in the
I know you did.
original amendment, but I actually think it's a good idea. I think it's a good transition because we're talking about a group of people for the most part that are kind of transitioning. You know, because the income's a little bit higher. There are
Right.
people right now on Medicaid,
Right.
so a lot of them will be transitioning to jobs eventually that will pay more and put them on private insurance.
Right.
And they'll have to pay premiums then in most cases. So this is, I think it's a good transition to
Yeah.
get them used to paying a premium.
Doug, as you can see, we may differ.
Yeah, good and honorable people can disagree on how it should be, and that's the way that it should be, and I appreciate that fact. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, as always with my co-host, John Barker, and you're watching Legislative Updates, and thank you for doing so. If you're watching on your screen right now, which you'd have to be, on your left is John Barker, representative from the 70th District, and in the middle between us is Tom Sawyer from the 95th District. And Tom, first off, thanks for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
And the second is your House Minority Leader. What does House Minority Leader do?
Well, I kind of lead the minority party. I'm the floor leader on the debate. Try to as best as I can schedule our amendments and prepare the debate. But I also have the duty at the beginning of the session of appointing all the Democrats to their committees. You know, appointing people to their offices, appointing their seat assignments, and sometimes that kind of stuff's the toughest thing to do when it gets down to it. But once the session gets going, it's really trying to be a spokesman for the caucus and to lead the floor debate.
Okay, so as minority leader, that would mean you would be, in this case, a Democrat.
Right.
And so when you do the placement like the seating, you're talking about seating the Democrats?
Yes.
And is that a lot of conflict over, or some conflict?
Oh, there can be.
Really?
Some certain seats are more prized than others, and in fact, back when we had more of us, so we had the back, part of the back row. The back row and the front rows are usually the most coveted, and then the aisle seats. So, you know, I mean.
Guess I hadn't
Right,
even considered that it would be an issue. And I know from when you and John talking while we were off camera, and you have been in the legislature 3 different times.
That's correct.
And so your first tour of duty was?
I first got elected in 1986, and I served until 98 when I ran for governor.
So 12 years.
12 years. And then I came back in 2003 and served 7 years, and I got appointed to the parole board, so I left that time. And then I came back with John in the 2012 elections and have served since then. So it's been a 12-year, 7-year.
Wow, that's a lot. 26 years altogether for you.
Yeah, it is.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your service.
Well, thank you.
And your district is, of course, in Wichita. And what area of Wichita?
I have the Delano area. It includes Friends University, Newman University, and the area just west of downtown.
Okay.
And Doug, in 7 years, I was finally invited to the minority leader's office.
Is that right?
It was this week.
Yeah.
We were talking business, and he invited me back, and he's got a great view of the Capitol, from the Capitol to the OJA and different parts. And I thought, well, I've been here 7 years, and I've finally been invited. I'm not sure if the past minority leaders would have invited me, but since Tom and I are friends, he did invite me in. And when he talks about assigning offices, he's got a very nice office.
Oh, way to go. That's only fair. That's only fair.
As
If you've
the
got to make
leader.
the assignments, well, you paid the price, so you can pick the one you want. That seems fair.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about, a number of things, and I can tell you before, last week when we finished up the show, John and I were talking, and he said that you would be out, and John spoke so highly of you, and what a good gentleman you are, how much you're respected, and how much he respects you, and that speaks well. That speaks well, because, like I said, good and honorable people can differ and disagree about points, but they don't have to become enemies out of it. It's just a disagreement. Some points you'll find that you agree on perfectly, and others you do not. And on the screen, we're going to be putting up the contact information for John Barker and also for Tom Sawyer, so you'll be able to communicate with them. And this show, of course, Tom, you may or may not know it, but this show, the Legislative Updates, goes across generally the northern half of Kansas, southern half of Nebraska. And so there's a lot of people that are touched by this. Unfortunately, it doesn't reach down to Wichita because that's on the Eagle, but it does when it goes up to the website. It'll go worldwide from there.
That's great.
And so, Tom, what's been the biggest challenge as being a minority leader for this go-around? What's the biggest thing that you have to deal with?
I tell you, well, there are 41 Democrats in the Kansas House, and their views are varied, their backgrounds are varied, and when people ask me I go, it's kind of like trying to herd cats. 41 cats. I mean, trying to get everybody in the same direction isn't very easy most of the time.
And we have that in the Republican Party.
Yeah, right.
Also.
Yes.
Well, there are times then when you're working on something that may be something that you want to do for your own political party, and you find that some of the cats bail out on you, and you pick up some Republicans bail out the other direction. And is it trying to figure out which bills that you can muster enough support for?
Oh, it is. And one of the things, my first 12 years when I was in the legislature, for 2 years I was the majority leader. Right. When the Democrats had a 63-62 majority. So, talking about then counting votes, when the majority was that slim, almost every single bill we passed, we had to have some Republicans because we almost always lost a few Democrats. So that was so I got used to it. Those 2 years of trying to build those coalitions and become a really good vote counter because we had that slim majority. So I've kind of carried through with that when I was minority leader in the 90s, and now as I'm a minority leader again.
Okay, and as a minority leader, do you sometimes you get the team together, the Democrats together, and you say, here's what I think our position is, and you sort of share that information before you ever get into that point of coming into the chambers?
We do, but before we get to that point, usually there's a lot of discussions amongst Democrats, the small groups and amongst our leadership team to try to get to that position. And then once we've developed it, then it's trying to sell it to the whole caucus.
Okay. And how do you ascertain what the governor's desires are on specific bills? I mean, do you meet with like a chief of staff, or you meet with the governor, or both? Or
it's both. I mean, you don't meet with the governor that often, but almost daily with her legislative liaison, and then once or twice a week, maybe sometimes. It depends on what's going on. Maybe a little more often with her chief of staff, and then with the governor herself when needed. I mean, one time we were in the middle of a floor debate, and I had to leave because she called me down to her office because she wanted to talk about something. So, when the governor wants to talk, you listen.
Yeah. You get called down, and that's the end of that story, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
And John, you told me when we came in that this is day 63 out of 90.
Out of 90, and so we're moving right along. We're going to be working Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then we'll be off Thursday and Friday, and then come back in for 3 days. Or
it's scheduled for 5.
5, but hopefully we can get it done in 3. We're going to be on the floor. Then we go to what we call conference committees. So, we're going to be busy, and this is when we really kick out most of our bills. These last few days, committees have been working, and fact-finding, and I kicked out or passed out 4 bills today out of Fed and State. So those will have to be run on the floor, and then they'll go to the Senate, or if they're Senate bills, either if we've amended them, they go back for a conference committee. So it's these last few days are
quite a process. Days. All right, and when we come back from break, we'll talk a little about school financing and how that might change the remaining time with the legislature for this year. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with, of course, John Barker from the 70th District. And in the middle between us is Tom Sawyer from Wichita, the 95th District. And when we cut away to break, we were going to talk a little bit about school finance, because that's been an issue that's been going for many, many years. And update us on the school finance. Is there a decision coming out fairly soon from the Supreme Court? And if so, what happens from there? And
we don't know when we have a deadline, and we have 2 competing bills. Tom, do you want to talk about the Senate bill?
Yeah, a Senate bill 142 is the proposal that was basically issued by the State Board of Education, and then the governor accepted it, put it in her budget, and it puts in basically $92 million in addition to the base aid funding for next year, and that's what it does.
Yeah. The House bill is just a little different.
Yeah.
We have a little less money.
Yeah.
And we have more policy.
Right.
Now we have since divided that into 2 bills, where we have the money and then we have the policy. And our argument would be that the Supreme Court, in its decision, said that we need to address the needs of that 25% that are not doing well. And I think they indicated that that's where you need to be looking at. So we put policy to address those issues. And so we're asking for some outcomes. If we're going to spend the money let's also have some outcomes. I think the House will probably take up the House bill first so that the House has a position on education. The Senate has a position, right, Tom?
Right.
And then what do?
We have conference.
We go to conference and we negotiate between the House and the Senate. And those will be the education. Tom will play a very important part at that point on what he can give up and what he needs.
Yeah.
And hopefully we come up with a compromise.
Right. And actually there is a third kind of player
Right.
involved. There isn't a bill that they support, but the Schools for Fair Funding,
Yes.
they disagree with what the State Board of Education and the governor, the way they've interpreted the Gannon
Right.
decision, say, no, it's not 90 million one time. We need to do 90 this year, 180 the next, 270, then 360. So they're basically saying it's 360 and not 90.
Mm-hmm.
And
But that's the group that's suing
right,
the state.
right. But you know, they are also lobbying too, and
Mm-hmm.
part of my job is keeping our members basically under the governor's bill and not supporting the schools.
And I think I hope that it eventually works out between the governor's bill or the Senate bill and the House bill, somewhere in between, because I don't know if the state can afford the other.
The other one is very expensive.
It's a little outrageous.
Yeah, and actually the funding, the funding for next year in the House, and the dollar amount isn't much different. Like I said, I think it's 87 million in the House bill, 92 million in the Senate. So that's 5 million. But the biggest problem I think that we have with House bill is it takes away 2 years of funding that were passed last year. You know, Senate Bill 61 spread it over 4 years, and this bill gets rid of the last 2 years of that. And I think the courts would have a lot of problem with that as well. But
and the court may, but as you say, that's a point that could be negotiated through.
That's true.
I think the important part from the House position is if we're going to spend this additional funds, we want outcomes, and we want some policy in there, because the court in its decision did say that 25% that are not doing well, that's an area that you need to concentrate in, and I agree with that. You know, if we spend more money, let's spend more money in that area, get those kids up where they can be successful.
What's the mechanism for verifying that they're doing better as you put money in? What's in place now?
Well, there's very little in place now, but Tom may agree, but some of this has to do with, targeting certain populations. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, some of the standards we use now, for example, graduation rates,
Right.
are they going up, or testing, are the test scores getting better in reading and math? I mean, so those are the kinds of things we kind of use now to see if we're making improvements. One of the concerns about some of the policy in the House bill is that we're kind of stepping on local school boards areas and the State Board of Education. I mean, that's their job, is to determine, education policy, progress and that stuff, and not really the legislature. Our job is to fund it, but I understand them wanting to try to get some better accountability, but I think at least some of the things in that bill definitely, I think, go a little too far. In fact, I don't think the committee took it out, but at one point the bill included the kind of roofs that school boards can use when they build new schools. And I go, that is really micromanaging.
I didn't understand that part myself.
Yeah,
I'll be honest.
That is micromanaging.
That is. But I also think that, I agree with local school boards, but with local school boards, we're using state money. So the state does have an interest.
Yeah.
And we want positive outcomes. If we're spending more money, then we would like to see the eighth grade math skills, reading skills go up. So we've also got the kids that have English as a second language. We need to spend more money in some areas, not the entire state, but in some areas, to get these kids able to speak English, because they're here, they've got to learn, they have a chance of going to the university. And I think it's a 5-year program. They're going to fund that for 5 years. So I like that part of it. There are parts of it I don't like, but I'm always hopeful that it comes out in conference committee.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's interesting. I know school finance has been going on for years, that we talk about it almost every time we have legislative updates.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, you're watching legislative updates. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our final segment of legislative updates for this week. And as always, John Barker's on the show. He's a co-host with me. John's from the 70th District. And today we have Tom Sawyer from the 95th District in Wichita. And Tom and John, both, thank you so much for coming out of the legislature. I know it's been a long week. You're ready to get home, and you're willing to stop by here at the studio and give us an update, because this information goes out, and sometimes this is the only information some people get about what's working with the legislature. And sometimes you read in the paper and it's somebody else's interpretation, or it's not even accurate. But we appreciate you coming by.
And I think people can see that we have a bipartisan side. We, you know, when you read the newspapers, you think it's very partisan, but it's not. Tom and I have been out to dinner many times. We differ in certain areas. We have different life experiences. And Tom's an accountant,
Right.
So he's big about the numbers.
Yeah.
I'm more on policy and philosophical things that I would like to get done. But we've had a great time. I've enjoyed serving my time with him.
Well, good. I appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. And the contact information for Tom is on the screen, and also for John. Thanks for watching. See you next time on Legislative Update.